Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Joram Barrez, and together with my co-host Filip Hrisafov, we're going to talk today about data as a first-class citizen in Flowable. Now, we know there are concurrently some other sessions going on which are really interesting, but if you're watching this live, thank you for joining. We're very honored. But all the sessions are going to be recorded, so you can watch them whenever you want. Also, we have Beth sitting in the background for all your questions. There should be a Q&A window in front of you. You can ask whatever you want. Make sure to give him lots of work, because at the end of the presentation, he is going to join and we're going to talk through all of them together. Now, let's get going. So I am going to talk first about some introduction about data. We're going to talk about a lot about data. And I think, frankly, at the end of this presentation, you're going to be bored by the word data. So what is the goal today? Flowable has always been about executing processes, executing cases, CMMN, executing rules, DMN. If you are a customer of Flowable, or you found us, or whatever you are here for, you probably found us through those channels because you have a process case, rules, or any of these kind of mixed needs. Now, if you think a bit through, then you'll realize that the use case, the real use cases that you're trying to solve with those process cases, rules, and all the others is probably something related with data. You're consuming data, aggregating data, processing data, producing new data, but it's typically around data. Most companies these days are data-driven companies. Now, we're going to talk first about what we have today in the platform already available to you right now, and then we're going to have a look at what's coming in the next winter release, the 3.15 release, and beyond that. Now, one of the hard things here is that it's really hard to define data. Normally, such a presentation would start with a definition on the screen, but it's really hard about data. We know data is all around us, but what it really is really hard to capture. And the fact is that it's hard to capture because there are many facets to it. There's the economical angle. I mean, data is the driver of many business decisions. There's hundreds of Excel sheets flying around in any given company every day, making decisions based on that data. You've got companies whose whole business model is based on data. Think about Google, Meta, and even Amazon is basically, even if it's delivering things, it is a data-driven company. Data is what they make their money on. Also, politically, we all know about the kind of data algorithms, the complex data algorithms that are influencing people on social media to change their vote. But on a better tone, you also have data algorithms that are used to gather data about government policies, to predict government policies, what the government should be doing. On the science level, we now have the tools to use a lot of data, to have a lot of data points, run simulations on hardware that is capable of processing that data, which wasn't possible, let's say, a decade ago, thanks to the cloud and other kind of tooling. So really leaps there. Technologically, anything from a toaster to a car is generating data, doing something with data. And we have the tools now to actually do something with that data. Ethically and legally, of course, is always lagging a bit behind. And we've often heard the phrase, data is the new gold. And it is true, we are in kind of a rush for the gold, like in the days of the Far West, and there definitely are good cowboys, but there are bandits too who wants to steal our cattle. And we could fill a whole FlowFest talking about the ethical and legal side about data. The thing is that we as technology people, we have some sort of responsibility also at this current day to make sure that what we do is ethically and properly legal. But let's spin back to Flowable for a minute. What does it mean for Flowable? Well, I already said it. We're about consuming data, aggregating data, processing in some way, producing no data. And data truly is the glue between it all. And that's apparent from our history. We started with the BPMN, the process engine. CMMN engine followed after that. DMN engine was pretty much the same time. By the way, these three, which we also call the triumvirate, the holy three inside of Flowable, they're called now the BPMN Plus. If you go to the OMG website, you'll see they're now named, the three of them together, as BPMN Plus. So we started with those engines, basically those kind of building blocks to execute processes, cases, rules. But very soon you'll see in our history that we've added things, models, abstractions that are related to data. The services are there to get data from somewhere or kind of manage data somewhere. Data objects are there to have remote data objects to represent them in Flowable, but actually have them live on the other side, channels and events to push and to pull in data, query models to try to make sense of the data produced by Flowable, the data dictionary to make sure that our data is valid. And Philip is going to, in a minute, is going to quickly show you what that all means. But the point is, our title is Data as a First-Class Citizen in Flowable. But the truth is that it has actually always been a first-class citizen. Since the inception of Flowable, data has been the driving force, has been, as the French say, and they have a nice way of saying it, the raison d'être, the reason of being is data. And expansion in this area, as we will show now in the 3.15 release and in the future, is just a natural thing for the engines that we already have to grow. But Philip, you want to say some things more about what we have right now today?
Exactly. Yeah. So Joram gave a really nice intro. Thank you very much. So let's see what we have in Flowable for handling this data, right? So first, let's talk about, Joram already mentioned them, so service registries, right? So the service registry model allow you to basically write some custom logic, expressions using expressions or scripts, call to external services using the REST API, and basically you use them to either retrieve, process, or prepare, you guessed it, some kind of data, right? The service models are independent pieces of models. They're independent of the process, they're independent of the case, and they're usually contained of a set of operations. And each set of operation has input and output parameters. So these input parameters are basically used for the data, how this service needs to be executed. And then the output parameters are, once the execution is done, what the service produced, right? And where would you like to use these models, right? So you will see it's a common theme about the benefits of the models would be reusability. So one thing is reusability, right? So you can think of them as a central library of some external services. This provides a nice abstraction to the modeler user, because the modeler user doesn't really need to know any details about the service. Is it a REST service? Is it some script? Is it some expression? What authentication I need to use? So like all this burden is removed from the user, because the only thing that they need to carry in their processes and cases when they're using these services is the data that they need to basically call the service. So there are the input parameters, and what do they want to do with the data that the service produced? So those are the output parameters. How do they map this data from the service output into the process or case that they want, right? And here on the screen, we can see some examples of these models, right? So we can here see the operations. So these are some operations for some service. We can see the different settings here. You can change the name of the operation or the key of the operation. And then we have the filter parameters. So the filter parameters here are the input parameters for this operation. And here for this particular service type, we have the filter definition where you basically, what do you do with this input parameter, right? Next type of models that we have are the data object models. So this the data object usually represents some kind of a structure of a data. So they can be a customer, a patient, a project, and stuff like that, right? And Flowable currently has two different types of implementations of this data. So we have the database-backed data object, which is for data managed by Flowable. So this data usually lives next to the Flowable tables into the same database. This data is accessed into the same transaction as the Flowable runtime data is done. And the other type of implementation is the REST-backed data. So this is usually for data which is external to Flowable. So this lives somewhere outside of Flowable. So a REST call needs to be done to get the data, or a REST call needs to be done to produce the data. So you can think of this data object something like remote business object. So that's like a business object which is somewhere remotely, it's either in the table or through REST. And what is the relationships for data objects towards services? So a data object always needs a service model. So the data object model defines the what. So what is the data that we have, the fields, the type of the data, and things like this. And the service model defines the how. Basically, how do we access the data? How do we create this type of data? How do we search this type of data and things like this? So this is the relationship. And again, so benefits of using data objects, it allows you a reusability again. So these data objects are now a central library of the business data that we have. So this allows you to create better, richer, clearer models, which are more easier to understand and are scoped. It provides a nice abstraction to the business users, to the modelers, because instead of thinking, okay, how do I need to, how do I create this data? How do I access this data and things like this? They only need to care about the input and output. So they have this data object, and what do they need to create a data object? What do they need to get a data object, and things like this. So it allows a good separation of concerns because this data lives outside of the Flowable runtime data. So because the processor case is not the place where you want to store, for example, this customer data. And it also allows you to store this data and reuse it in different processes and cases. And here on the screen, we can see some examples. So here we see the fields of this data object. It's really, you can see it's really simple where you have the type of the field and some other extra parameters. Here on the right side, you see the new field. When you create a new field, how it looks like. And of course, here at the bottom and at the end, we have the link to the service, because we said the data object always needs to have a service to know how to get this data. So we went through services and data objects, right? Other type of models that we have for accessing data is the channel and events. And in Flowable, we have two types of channels. So we have an inbound channel, which basically is a channel which represents some kind of a source that is emitting data, that is producing some kind of data. And then this data is then pushed into the case or a process during runtime, and which this then allows this process or case to react to data changes in real time, right? And outbound channels represent a way for Flowable to push data into some data source, right? So this would be representing the model part of some larger pipeline. You want to create some data and you want to notify other systems. You would use an outbound channel and push it there. And this data usually, so these channels usually are implemented with some queue-like technologies. For example, we have out-of-the-box support at Flowable for Kafka, JMS, RabbitMQ, AWS SQS, and even emails as channels that allow you to do this data. And the channels is the how, and then the events is basically what goes through this channel. So an event represents the data which is flowing through these channels. So what is the difference? So you might say, okay, channels sound similar to service model, right? So there is some input, it does something, right? However, they're different conceptually, because the service invocation is the deliberate step in the model. It says, okay, now I want to call this service, do something and get the data back and then continue, right? However, with channels, it is not known when the data comes or even if the data comes, because Flowable has no control over these inbound channels. The data is produced somewhere else and then it arrives through these channels in Flowable, right? And then outbound channels, they're a bit closer to the services. However, the difference is basically in the transport mechanism, but also in the fact that with services, you get some output back, right? But with outbound channels, you don't really care about the output, because you want to push the data to this channel, and then someone will get this data and use this data somehow, right? It's outside of Flow. And difference between data objects and events. So events are similar to data objects, however, they're simple. They're a bit simpler. They provide only structured data. They don't need a service model as well, because the channel is fully responsible for handling the event. So this means that you can actually have one event and multiple channels can use the same event, and vice versa. And then events are usually part of some larger ecosystem of events. For example, if you have some microservice architecture, you can actually hook in channels and events really easily here. And what are the benefits here? So it's, again, reusability, right? So we have, as I mentioned, one channel can use multiple events or vice versa. It provides a nice abstraction layer for the modelers, because they don't really need to care, how do I set this up? How do I communicate with Kafka? How do I communicate with RabbitMQ, with JMS? They don't even need to know that there's Kafka behind the scenes, right? They only care about the data that they need to use to populate the event structure. So what is the data that they need to send, and what is the data that they're getting from the channel, and how they're mapping it here. And here we can see some examples. Here we see an inbound channel with the consultation, like a Kafka inbound channel with a consultations topic. We see here the pipeline. Basically, it's JSON with some event, with fixed event. And here we see the event structure. Basically, it's a simple structure that gets transmitted through the channels. And now I'll leave it to Joram.
Right, thank you, Philip. That was a good overview of what is there today. And these are really, for us, the fundamental building blocks of what we're building upon and expanding upon in the upcoming release and the next releases beyond that. And the goal really is to have Flowable as a central platform that can integrate with just anything that you would throw at it. Now, other thing, Philip, which I didn't mention is that, and I think it's a nice addition, all of the images here in this presentation have been generated with AI. I did a presentation an hour ago about AI. If you haven't seen it, shameless plug, watch the recording, or if you were there live, thank you very much. But basically, all of the images are generated. This is the brave new world. Anyway, we talked about what we have right now. Let's see what is upcoming in the next releases. And don't go running too far, Philip, because I'm going to need you for some demo stuff. All right. So the first thing is open API supports. Now, we heard from many customers that they want to integrate with some internal services or some external services, but that service has an open API specification, an open API document. Now, open API is a standard that basically is, you can write YAML, JSON, maybe there's others ones. The point is, it's a description of what is the URL, what is the way that users need to authenticate to use this operation? What are the parameters? What's the request body, etc. Now, this sounds very familiar, right? This sounds almost like a service model. And that's why the Open API generation import is actually all about, making sure that, you are faster to generate these service models. Now, the Open API specification itself is maintained by the Linux Foundation. It's briefly known in a previous couple of years ago as the Swagger specification. You might have heard from that, and you see in the documentation and online that they use Swagger and OpenAPI, they mix it a bit. And the thing is that OpenAPI solves for us is that building a service of a decent size is quite tedious right now, and it's also logical, right? Because a service model is something that's executed by a computer. The smallest typo will make sure that it just can't execute it. So it's tedious, you need to, error prone, and you need to be very careful about what you're doing. So the goal with our OpenAPI, work we're doing now, integration, is that we speed up the building of those service models. And we're old enough to remember the days of WSDL. What we're not doing is falling into the trap of doing a hard fixed binding like we used to do back in those days. That, is very inflexible. Our goal really is to get you started faster, to make sure that the mistakes, the typos are avoided and stuff like that. But I think the best way is that we just show it. So Philip, you're very good at seeing mistakes that I do during live demos. So if you can just, I'll squeeze a bit, and let's see what we can do, right? Okay, let's go to Chrome. I've got work running here, that's for later, and I have design. Let's say I already created a FlowFest app before we started. And if I now go to the one you'll see here in the version that we have, which is not the version that you have at home, there's a new button, Generate. There's a couple of options here. I'm not going to spoil it yet, but one of them is the OpenAPI import. So let's start. Here we go. And the first thing I need to do is I'm going to upload a file. If all goes well, I make sure that there is no
private data there.
No secret data here. So here we go, and open it. And let's see, I'm just going to leave all the defaults as it is. This is a demo after all. You can select what you want and tweak it a bit. The point is, just the story you want to bring today is that this now gives me a summary of what's going to be generated. It's going to generate two things, actually, a service and a data dictionary. And you will tell more about that in a few minutes. I can change these things now if I want to, tweak it before I generate them. But, you get what that means. If I click import, there it is. There is my data dictionary. There is my service. Let's just quickly open one.
It's all done within a minute. If you need to type it by hand.
Oh yeah.
People who have done it would know.
Oh yeah, absolutely, right? This is, let's just look at a few things. This is a URL, the get. I think there is no input here because it's a general find. But you see the output parameters are mapped here and stuff like that. So you see how this saves you a ton of time, basically, and that's what this OpenAPI generation is all about. All right, let me continue quickly. Now, you don't need to run. There's a demo coming in 30 seconds. So basically, if you've been listening to what Philip says, is abstraction is the key to what we do. Whenever we add a new model type, it is to abstract something further. And that also makes sense because abstraction in software engineering is the way we have productivity leaps, because otherwise we'd all still be writing assembler code these days, and we aren't. We are building on hundreds of layers of abstraction to make our lives easier and produce software faster. So one of the things that we've been working on in 3.15 is can we abstract this concept of a service model, a service registry model, or a custom piece of logic? Can we abstract this further? And what we have in 315 is the so-called palette editor. Now, I'm just going to show you what it is. I think that's way easier than just talk about slides. So let's see, Philip, if you want to join me again, but I don't make any
mistake.
Thank you very much. So let's quickly, just for people that don't know what the palette is, I'm just going to create a process, BPMN process. The palette is basically the thing on the left-hand side, right? This thing here, that's what we call in Flowable the palette, right? It's elements you can drag and drop onto the canvas, and we all know how this works. It has properties. Apologies. And basically, what the palette editor, as the name implies, allows you to do is edit what is there in the palette, right? I mean, that makes sense. We've got customers who want to sometimes hide certain things because they're not allowing their users to model this, but we also have a lot of customers who want to add their own custom logic here, and this is what it's all about. Let's quickly go here. Oops, yeah, I want to save changes, that's all fine. Let's click here and go to the palettes. This is new, you don't have that at home, but basically I can see here all the palettes right now deployed for my current tenants in my system. And these are the, the classical default ones. If I now say, for example, I want to take the work BPMN as a base, and then demo FlowFest. Oops, always when you type something in a real live stream, you make mistakes. I'm just going to use demo key here, save it. And you can see how this UI looks quite familiar. If you've used the palette, all of the elements are here, right? And I could say, well, for whatever reason, I'm not allowing my users, my modeling users, to have a timer start event. I can actually hide it. Yep, all good. It's not visible anymore. If I want to create a new service, I mean, right now you see service task and script. You have to have some imagination. There is actually a button on another branch that I'm not running today, but to have service registry models, it's not really hard to do, right? It's a wrap around some technical bean invocation, getting too technical here. Yes. But the point is, I'm able to create a custom element here that can give an icon, whatever I want, give some title, give some names, select some things that I want, maybe I don't want them to be asynchronous. I can, not allow this to the user. And anyway, the point is that I can now deploy this to my tenant, and basically users in my tenant, the modeling users, will now be able to use this custom palette when they create a process. And this works for CMMN, for form, for anything that really works with a palette. That's a really, really cool thing, I think. Yeah, we had the support for custom palettes for many years now, but it always required a reboot of your server. It was in JSON or XML, and with the cloud, and you had just a session on the cloud, right? With the cloud, there you can't do that. So we needed a dynamic way to deploy this. And if you look at behind the scenes, you'll see that we build it in exactly the same way as definitions, instances, and stuff like that. So it's very similar. If you look behind the scenes with the code, you'll recognize that. All right, let's get back to the slides. I think this is your slot, right?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, cool. So yeah, we talked about data, right? So when we talk about data, we also have to make sure that the data is consistent and valid. And why is that the case, right? So we've seen, as Joram mentioned at the beginning, data is all around us, and data is keep being produced more and more, and is being consumed by us more and more through our social media or through our work and things like this. We have some estimates from the public internet, putting this amount to around 328 million of terabytes of data being produced every day, 6 million of Google searches every minute, 230 million of emails being sent per minute, right? 42 million of WhatsApp messages per minute. So this is, as you can imagine, so these are large numbers in the millions of data being produced every single minute, right? So why is it important for this data to be valid, right? So when we have so much data, it's really of a vital importance that this data is valid and consistent, because we have things such as decision making, right? So when you're running your business, when you want to make a decision, you want to make sure that you're doing your decision based on data which is valid and which is consistent, right? Otherwise, you can make a mistake, do a wrong business decision, and stuff like that. There's also in the banking sector and also in other sectors, you have to comply with certain regulations, right? So there are certain compliance purposes where you have to provide this data and make sure that the data that you're, for example, gathering for your user is according to these regulations. So make sure that this data is valid and consistent. And also, when you do audits, you make sure that you have to make sure that the audit that you're creating creates a valid data, right? And it's a bit linked to these things. You also have the economic implications, because if you're doing a decision making based on invalid data, means that you can have certain economic implications. If you decide to buy certain stock based on data which is not correct, you can lose some money, right? And of course, final but not least, there are a lot of legal and security concerns, because if you do certain things based on invalid data because you haven't validated the data correctly, or you've received it and through some other means and it's not correct, and you've done certain things with this data, it can have legal repercussions, right? And also security concerns, right? So what would be, in a way, kind of like next step of Flowable, how you can solve this validation and consistency of the data with Flowable? So what we've added recently in 3.14 actually was the data dictionary. So the data dictionary represents a meta model that defines the anatomy of data. So it has the structure of the data, including nesting information. It has the type information, and it also allows you to define certain constraints of the data. And all of this without implying any implementation detail, because the data might be in JSON format, might be in YAML, might be in XML, might be in some new format which comes in the future. But for us, that part is really an implementation detail. And for as a modeler user, you only need to care about how your data looks like. And this meta model can already be applied to other models which you are working with data. For example, in 3.14, this is already used within processes and cases through the so-called data contract. So this data contract basically binds the meta model, the data dictionary, to runtime data and performing thus runtime validation. So this makes sure, for example, you can define that a specific variable is a customer and adheres to the customer data dictionary with all the constraints and all the type validity which are there. So this data contract makes sure that your processes and cases adhere to it and guarantee you this data validity and data consistency. So let's see how this looks like. So here we have, let me see.
You also want me for the demo?
Yeah, maybe if I don't make a mistake. We don't want to save this, of course, right?
Yeah.
So, here. So here we have really, it's like a small app that we've done. So we have here a hospital, so this is a data dictionary. And here we can see, here we have the patient basically and all the information for the patient. So for example, we can have the ID, and I think the ID has a minimum length of 1, right? You can even add custom validations if you want, some regular expression, a normal expression and things like this. So based on the type.
That means that if I do a piece of variable, let's say in the process, I think for example, and I create something that would invalidate that, I would not be able to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So if you, for example, let's say you want to set an ID which is of empty ID, there will be an error.
So it guarantees
you cannot create one. Yeah. So when you're using this variable in the process, you cannot have that. And it also allows you to link data. So you can see that this consultation has a patient. And this consultation contains this patient. So it guarantees you, it gives you this guarantee basically to you. Cool. Yeah. Things don't go running away. We have one more demo from me to make sure that I don't make a mistake. Good. So what is the difference with the data objects, right? Because data dictionary there's a structure, some elements and fields, right? The data object had the same thing. So they look similar to the service because both of them define some kind of structure, type, so they provide relationships, right? Even the UI looks similar. However, the difference is in the fact that the data objects live in the runtime, right? They can be in different tables, or they might also be completely outside of global control through REST, through other services, right? While on the other side, data dictionaries can be applied to any other model, to any data that you have, right? In 3.15, we're going to add support that this data object also reference a data dictionary, and thus making sure that on the Flowable side, at least, when you create this data, when you get access to this data is validated, and even avoid duplication through this by not defining it twice. All right, so this was data objects, and this was all models that we've had. So let's talk now about some new concept that we are introducing in 3.15, and this is the connector concept. So this connector concept typically is generated. So you already saw, Joram showed the Open API import, where you can use, let's say, an Open API documentation, put it there, and it generates your service definition, right? and the data object and things like this. We have another mechanism, which we'll see in a bit, using some native wizards that would basically allow you to quickly create something. And these connectors usually consist of service registry models, because there's always some kind of like accessing this data, creating this data and stuff like that for services. And then optionally, you can create data objects, you can create data dictionaries, and you will see you might even be able to create pages out of the box, right? And when using them, there's usually a choice how you want to use them, right? So one is you want to reference the data. So, and this is just usually done by using data objects and with optionally using data dictionary for validation. So if this data is outside of Flowable control, and we will see in a bit how this can look like. So you like to reference the data with data objects. And another approach is to basically incorporate this data through the data dictionary validating in Flowable, for example, like with Open API we saw, and that one has also certain constraints, so we can use that to create a data dictionary for us at Flowable. And optionally, maybe generate some kind of page to manage this data. So this is what I was hinting at. So this is an integration with Salesforce, which we are working on and which will be available in 3.15. So this will be out of the box using native wizards to generate these connectors. And this would allow you to basically access and interact with Salesforce data directly within processes and cases. So let's see now how this looks like. And I think Joram will join me now.
Here I am again to
exactly
stare at you.
So we'll start from scratch, but I'll create now a new app. I'll call it as, oops, what should...
No, if you demo live.
If I demo live,
yeah.
So let's create a Salesforce app. And let's now generate. So we have here generate. Joram already hinted, we don't want to spoil it. So the next operation or generator we have is Salesforce, right? And here, the only thing, behind the scenes, we've already connected our design with our Salesforce instance. So this is all live, right? So and it's called Salesforce. And to make sure don't make a typo.
Also here, this is going to be a drop down. Right now, you still have to type it, still in progress, but we wanted to show it already. But this is basically the S objects, which is a concept from Salesforce.
Yeah. So
that's available within your Salesforce environment.
Right? Yeah. So you have either you can have custom objects which you create on your own, or there are some out-of-the-box objects that Salesforce has, such as accounts, leads. Like if you work with Salesforce, you would know what this is, right? And I'll take a look, generate a preview again.
Hopefully this works, because now it's connecting actually over the internet
to Salesforce.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. And here we see, so we saw with Open API, we generate just a service and a data dictionary, but here we generate more data. So here we are generating actually data object, because we are referencing the data from Salesforce. That's the main source of information. We have a form and we have a page here. And so here you can see the service model basically that is there and the data dictionary model that looks like. So let's now import this into an app, and there we go. So now we have all the information here, and we can see, for example, so this is the service, how this looks like.
It's interesting there that you have the token, right? I mean, this is all the integration is handled by the mechanism that we've implemented a while ago.
Yeah,
basically, we'll make sure that you do this all dance and all that. So you don't need to worry about any of that. That's all done for you behind the scenes.
Yeah. So we have configured our design and also our work instance to work with this, and you will see how this works in a bit. So we also have, if we go here, so if I go back, and let's see, we can see a page. Basically, it's a page where we can see the data. So let's now go and try it out. So let's
we see a zoom window that's in the way. So zoom window go away.
So let's now add our page. So this will be our Salesforce app. And then let's add our lead admin. So this would be our lead
just some random
admin. So let's save this and let's now publish it. Maybe just show that there really is no Salesforce here, as you can see. We can even refresh. And let's now publish. So we publish this.
Oops. Well, I have a breakpoint. Sorry. I can switch back.
Okay.
See, this is all running real live code.
Exactly. So we publish that, and let's refresh now. And here, I think at the bottom it will be exactly. So here we see Salesforce, and here, so this does a call to Salesforce, the whole authentication, and we can see all the information we have. We even have like here the form, the other form that we had, the view form, where you can see way more information about Salesforce, right? So yeah, this you can imagine that you would be able then to use it out of the box and play around with it.
Which is super cool. All right.
Exactly.
Last part of the presentation, I think the demo. I'm making sense of data. When you have Flowable, you're generating lots and lots of data, and basically we already had ways to work with that data. It's in the database, in the query, Elasticsearch, could query it, but it was quite cumbersome. So one of the things we've added to 3.15 is a higher level query builder and the dashboards. Dashboards in this sense means that I can create live dashboards within work to get insights and actions out of my data. And I think the best way is also looking at the time is just demoing it, right?
Yeah, let's see. This is
all right, here we go. So, well, let me first show the dashboards, and then we show All right, already spoiling it a bit by having a dashboard here. You see, this is the end result, and I'll build the dashboards live in a sec. I mean, this is my system. I've got a couple of processes running, a couple of cases, lots of tasks. These are the tasks by the definition. I see my processes. I see the open task versus completed tasks. I get a task table. So all kind of things you expect from a live dashboard. I can filter the data now only to show the case definition, patient treatment, maybe also the yearly performance review. Play around with this a bit, marketing campaign. You see how this goes.
Really cool and snappy.
And snappy, really, really fast. Let me quickly just show you how you build this, right? So let me just do the demo dashboard, because I really, really like that. The feeling you get from building this live is just fantastic. So let me say edit dashboard. And then basically I could say, let's take the other one that we had, the pie chart by definition. Where is it? This one. Let's do it like tasks. I'm not going to spend time on titles here.
And this all shows you live data, right?
Live data, right? Here we go. So let's just make this one a bit bigger. Let's add another component. Maybe the other one that we had, the task. Oops, task. Yeah, if you have to demo just a task state, right? Open versus closed. Open versus closed. Here we go, and let's not put that here, but let's put that here and here. Let's save it. All of these components, they contribute to the header here, to the filters, right? So again, I can play around with this here. I can also say start time before, and this is just gonna work because my data was generated a couple of days ago. But you see the way that this works and the way that this actually works really, really nice, and you can build some nice demos. If you've watched Micha's talk, he's also using some really nice dashboards. Check it out, because he showed some other cool things that I'm not showing. The last thing I want to show is that query builder that I talked about. So let me quickly go to the FlowFest app. Let's make query. Whoops, again, the typos here today are...
People that use it will already be familiar with this model, but they will not be familiar with this.
This one is the classical one where you write the Elasticsearch query yourself. This one is the new one where basically you do things like, I want to now query on not a dynamic process, but maybe it's a fixed process. It's my test process, for example. I can have another, maybe it's a case. I'm just gonna, again, you guys don't see that, but there is a zoom window overlaying all of this. I maybe can say it's a fixed case here. I can select it, and then I can say, let's do a nested and. You know how this goes, right? With maybe it's fixed time, maybe it's dynamic time, but you see how this goes. If I'm building a table, I can configure pagination, I can configure the results, etc. So really powerful feature that is coming in 3.15, and I love it, but maybe I'm a bit biased, of course.
I think everyone will love it.
Exactly. Everybody loves charts.
Yeah, everyone wants nice
anyway,
pictures.
End of this session. I think the story you wanted to bring is that data is really a first-class citizen, has always been a first-class citizen in Flowable. And oops, no, thank you. There are a lot of things around data that are in the pipeline. If you've watched the AI talk, there's a lot of things we do with data and AI. The platform will only get more integrations. We have this connector concept, with Salesforce being the prime one now. We're going to expand on dashboards. We have now in work. We're going to build them also in the future into design, that you can then build them there. But like I said, nothing is so cool as feeling the live data in work and playing around with it. We have the data dictionary, which is super cool, that you can analyze the whole flow of your data from start to end. Enhance the other models like the query. You could say, oh, this variable comes from here, etc. Really cool stuff that's upcoming there. There are standards from OMG we're keeping an eye on. I mean, we do BPMN, CMMN, PMN. Standards are our thing. There's an emerging standard, it's still in beta, which is called shared data model and notation. Keep an eye on that. If we need to implement it, we will do so. And lots of things we will be definitely with work for the next coming years to come. And then with that being said, hopefully Bert is able to join us for some questions.
You made him busy with questions. Yeah,
I hope so.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Bert.
Thank you, Philip and Joram, for the presentation.
Pleasure.
I've been gathering some questions.
Good.
Yeah, so let's jump into it. We have like 6 more minutes.
Good.
So the first question is like, can these dashboards be exported and then re-imported into other formats and environments?
A very good point. And actually, that's one of the points in the demo that we should have been shown, but we didn't. Actually, there is, when you hover one of these dashboard components, there's a button to export to CSV, which can then import into your favorite tool, Excel, and do whatever you want with it. Now, if you, again, shameless plug to my AI talk, if you would see that, you will see that we use that to feed it into ChatGPT for data analysis. I'm not going to spoil it. You have to see it for yourself. And that's really, really cool. So the goal is really that we can export, first of all, to CSV, because Excel is ubiquitous, right? If people have demands for, I don't know, Kibana, other kind of dashboards. I'm not forgetting the big one, right? You have this big
Power
Tableau, for example. If the question comes, we'll definitely analyze that and add that if needed. That's not the hard, technically not the hard part. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then the next question, also about dashboards, kind of. Can the query builder be used for other than dashboards, also for regular query models?
Yeah, I mean, not yet in the version that we were showcasing, but yes. So technically, what it does, it is generating behind the scenes the Elasticsearch query. So you will be able to go from the query to build the regular queries you have today. Right, that's possible. Whether you will be able to go back, because that's really technically way harder, that still has to be seen. From a complex one to a query builder, probably not, because you can lose information. But yeah, for sure, that's something that was on the roadmap anyway.
Right, and yet another question about dashboards.
Okay,
and
everybody loves dashboards.
Yeah,
of course they do.
It's asked: is Elasticsearch required for using dashboards?
At the moment it is, and it probably will be in 3.15, for the simple reason that we need to focus. I'd rather make things work first in the dashboards in the UI in Flowable work. But technically, there is no reason why we can't do a database backend. Now, some of the queries might get slow, right? Some of the things we know that Elasticsearch is really good at, that databases are not that good at. So that will come with a cost, obviously, in performance. But maybe for dashboards, it's not that needed. And we've got some ideas in the future. Maybe we can also have batches, like batch processing, that you prepare data for your dashboards. If it's really about, talking about terabytes of data, right? You can think about those kind of things. But those would be a good problem to have, because that means that people are really using it in anger.
Yeah. Right. Next question then. Let me see here. So will the service registry also support GraphQL at some point other than REST?
That's a good one. Yeah, in theory, it already supports GraphQL in a way, right? Because
we have customers that are
actually using it like that, right? So, but it's cumbersome to write, because you have to write the whole GraphQL syntax yourself as a template for the query. But yeah, we have requests from customers that to make it easier, for example, to the same way that you can use REST or the other service registry models that we have out of the box, GraphQL one, and the only thing which you need to define are just the operations you want to do and the data that you want to get and things like this. So yeah,
So the thing is that it's not yet planned, as far as I know.
It's not planned,
but
no,
if you are hearing this and you need it, the process, how to get these things into Flowable, use that process, and we can evaluate and add it. And technically, it's not that hard, right?
No,
GraphQL
it just needs to be planned exactly. And if you're a customer, create a change request, pushes it to the top.
Yeah. Okay. We have time for one last one, I think. Philip, you talked about all the different options to work with data in Flowable, and also the differences between them. And like, how do you go about choosing which one to use for your use case? Can you expand a bit on that?
Yeah, that can be an overwhelming thing, right?
That's a short question.
So there is, I mean, we have a lot of types, right? But I think it all depends on the type of data that you're dealing with, right? So for example, like if you're dealing with queues, then you're not in control of the data, or you don't know when it gets created, then channels and events are the right approach. For example, if you want to listen on when something comes on an email and you want to react to it, you want to use a channel and an event,
Yeah.
right? If you want to have a remote business object, like we said, for example, like you have a patient is over rest somewhere and you want to create it through Flowable, or you have Salesforce integration where you want to create leads, get the leads, display them in Flowable somehow, then you want to use data objects and services. So
we made a clear distinction between these types. We could have just put them all into one service or data thingy, but we really like to divide these concepts into what makes sense to us. Like you really think about it's a piece of data living remote, data object. It's coming into. They just say that we have 1 minute to finish, so that's perfect. And basically, we try to think about this concept in a way that if I want to push or pull data, well, that's a channel. We could have scrammed all of these in a service, but that would not be a good thing. It would be really complex, and that's why it takes a bit of education. But hopefully, this session has helped you there. Some education to get there, but once you know that, it simplifies your reasoning. Because again, abstraction is the way to make productivity gains. So I think we have 30 seconds left, and I think we better leave it at that.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining. Laters. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.